Hey there, and welcome to Malaysia's Human Rights page. From now on, we'll look at a landscape of complexity in Malaysia, where constitutional guarantees, Islamic law, cultural traditions, and international human rights norms strike with one another. Since 1957, Malaysia has emerged as a multiracial, multi-religious federation, and it has taken its own path in human rights, in which fundamental freedoms are protected. But the exercise of these rights is also subject to restrictions on grounds of public order, morality, and security. Malaysia's human rights process consisted of three distinct phases. First, in the early days after independence, the constitutional guarantees adopted by the country drew on British common law traditions. Second, subsequent decades saw security laws and constitutional amendments that curtailed rights in response to communal tensions. Third, the Reformasi movement of 1998 to 1999 marked a turning point, prompting civil society activists into action. In 1999, thus uniting its title with purposeful deeds, Suhakam was established, Human Rights Commission of Malaysia. Malaysia has been selective in its country's general pursuit of international human rights. Malaysia has taken part in various United Nations organizations, but the country has not ratified such major conventions as the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. The government's basic position was that universal human rights as an ideal must therefore take into consideration local contexts, but without destroying either our national values and social bondage or our group life as humans. The protection system of human rights in Malaysia runs on dual tracks. From a governmental standpoint, SUHAKAM does work such as raising awareness about human rights, investigating complaints, and making recommendations. Yet civil society is equally important. Groups run by the people like Proham, Hakam, Suka Society, and the Micah C Foundation are laboring away at a broad spectrum of concerns from civil and political rights to refugee protection and anti-discrimination advocacy. But even with such a framework, Malaysia is kept under heavy international fire. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have brought up some grave issues. Restrictions on the right to freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and association, detention without trial, the death penalty, treatment of refugees and migrant workers, discrimination against indigenous peoples and minorities, religious freedom restrictions, problems faced by LGBTQ+ individuals. The use of sedition laws against critics has also created a significant amount of hype. The difficult challenge: how to harmonize Malaysia's federal constitution with universal human rights standards, especially the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is certainly true that Part 2 of the Constitution lays down fundamental liberties, as in Articles 5 to 13. Still, the concept itself suffers much more than this in reality. Substantial hindrances to its development may be found which are not accepted by international standards for human rights. This creates tension in many areas, with the need to balance Malay special rights against other races, Islam's strategic role, and restrictions on religious freedom. Then with Sharia law running parallel to common law, it becomes even harder to ensure that all people have equal rights. Understanding human rights in Malaysia means appreciating the interplay between legal frameworks, institutions, political will, and international pressure. Progress has been uneven. Advances in women's rights coexist with persistent challenges in freedom of expression and refugee protection. Join us as we explore the constitutional foundations, Suhakam's role, civil society contributions, and pathways toward reconciling domestic law with international human rights standards. Malaysia operates under constitutional supremacy, where the federal constitution is the supreme law of the land, as stated in Article 4.1. This means all state institutions, including the legislature, executive, and judiciary, are subject to the Constitution and derive their powers from it. Any law inconsistent with the Constitution is void to the extent of that inconsistency, and courts have the power of judicial review to strike down such laws. The Federal Constitution of Malaysia, which came into force in 1957 as the Constitution of the Federation of Malaya and was amended in 1963 to form the Constitution of Malaysia, is the supreme law of Malaysia and contains a total of 183 articles. The Constitution establishes the Federation as a constitutional monarchy, having the Yang di Pertuan Agong as the head of state with largely ceremonial roles. It provides for the establishment and organization of three main branches of the government: the bicameral legislative branch called the Parliament, which consists of the House of Representatives, Dewan Rakyat, and the Senate, Dewan Negara; the executive branch led by the Prime Minister and his cabinet ministers, and the judicial branch headed by the federal court. So, how does the federal constitution relates to the human rights in Malaysia? The federal constitution of Malaysia guarantees fundamental human rights in Article 5 to 13, covering personal liberty, equality, freedom of speech and religion, and property rights. These constitutional articles are essential as they ensure every Malaysian is treated with dignity and fairness, regardless of background or belief. The existence of these rights promotes peace, justice, and equality by preventing misuse of authority and discrimination. When these human rights are respected and upheld, society becomes more stable and citizens can live freely, knowing that their fundamental liberties are protected under the law. Malaysia, a land of contrasts, a crossroads of cultures, religions, and histories. But behind this colorful diversity lies a deeper question: the state of human rights. Since independence in 1957, its federal constitution has promised equality, freedom of speech, religion, and peaceful assembly. But in reality, these rights have often been limited. Laws like the Internal Security Act and Sedition Act have restricted what people can say or how they can protest, all in the name of maintaining order and national security. It was in this climate that a turning point came: the creation of the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, known as SUHAKAM. Formed in 1999, SUHAKAM symbolized Malaysia's first real step toward recognizing and protecting human rights within its borders. The commission was established after international recommendations from the UN Vienna Conference on Human Rights. It was meant to bring Malaysia closer to global standards while responding to growing public demands for transparency and justice, especially after the Reformasi movement in 1998. SUHAKAM's job is clear: to promote and protect human rights. It investigates complaints, visits prisons and detention centers, and advises the government on laws and policies. Its team of commissioners, appointed by the King, come from various backgrounds, from law to education and social work. Every year, SUHAKAM publishes a report on the human rights situation in Malaysia. These reports have criticized government policies, from the use of preventive detention to restrictions on media and free assembly, pushing sensitive issues into public debate. Yet SUHAKAM's power is limited. Its recommendations are not legally binding. It can expose abuses, but it cannot force change. Its impact depends on political will, something that has not always been consistent. Recent reforms have strengthened the Commission. In 2023 and 2024, new laws gave SUHAKAM unrestricted access to detention centers and created a Children's Commissioner to protect minors, refugees, and stateless persons. These were important steps forward, but challenges remain. In 2025, the Commission faced delays in appointing new members and even interference in its investigations, such as the Taiping prison case, where officials blocked access to detainees. Despite obstacles, SUHAKAM has made its mark. It has shone light on police brutality, the death penalty, indigenous land rights, and religious freedom. Its 2019 investigation into the disappearances of Pastor Raymond Koh and activist Amri Chemat drew global attention and forced the country to confront the darker sides of its law enforcement. Beyond investigations, SUHAKAM educates. It runs workshops, public campaigns, and training sessions, helping citizens and officials understand that human rights are everyone's responsibility. Today, SUHAKAM stands as both a mirror and a messenger of Malaysia's struggles, and a messenger of its hopes for justice and dignity. Its story is one of progress and persistence, proof that, even in the face of resistance, the pursuit of human rights continues. In Malaysia, human rights are not protected by the government alone. They're also supported by many non-governmental organizations, or NGOs. These organizations stand up for fairness, equality, and justice, giving a voice to those who might otherwise be ignored. The first NGO is PROHAM, short for Persatuan Promosi Hak Asasi Manusia. Formed in 2011 by former SUHAKAM members, PROHAM aims to promote human rights, transparency, and good governance in Malaysia. They raise awareness through public discussions and statements on issues like freedom of expression and fair treatment. Next is HAKAM, or the National Human Rights Society. Established in 1991, HAKAM is one of the oldest and most active human rights organizations in Malaysia. They work to defend civil, political, and social rights, and often organize forums to educate people about their rights. HAKAM also collaborates with international bodies to strengthen Malaysia's human rights practices.
Ahmad is 14 years old and all alone in a strange place. This country is not his home, and his parents are not here. He doesn't speak the language. He has no proper documents. The police could arrest him and put him in immigration detention.
Another important NGO is SUKA Society, which focuses on protecting the rights of children, especially those who are vulnerable, such as refugees and indigenous children. Their Empowered to Teach program trains indigenous teachers in rural areas, giving more children access to education and a better future. Other than that, we have My Kasi Foundation, supports underprivileged families through welfare and education programs. They use a cashless system linked to beneficiaries' MyCAD, ensuring that help goes directly to those in need. Through initiatives like Love My Neighborhood and Love My School, My Kasi promotes dignity, equality, and care for all. Besides these, many other NGOs, such as Tanaganita and Women's Aid Organization, WO, continue to fight for migrant workers and women's rights. Together, these groups work hand in hand to build a more equal and just Malaysia. In the end, these NGOs remind us that protecting human rights starts with compassion and action. Whether it's education, welfare, or advocacy, each organization plays a role in shaping a society that values justice, respect, and human dignity. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch are two global organizations that work to protect human rights around the world. Both organizations are independent, research-based, and speak up when human dignity and fairness are threatened. In Malaysia, they have raised concerns about several ongoing human rights issues. Amnesty International Malaysia continues to oppose the death penalty. One example they highlighted is the case of Panir Selvam Pranthaman, who was executed in Singapore for a drug offense. Supporters argued that he was not the mastermind, but a drug mule, and deserved a fair chance to defend himself. Amnesty stated that the death penalty is a violation of the right to life. Amnesty International also reported concerns regarding freedom of expression among students. In May 2025, 6 students from University Malaysia Sabah were investigated after organizing a press conference related to a peaceful rally. This sends a message that students may be punished for speaking out. Amnesty called for investigations to be dropped and for real reforms to protect peaceful expression in Malaysia. Next, the issue reported by Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch reported another ongoing concern: the rights of indigenous communities in Sarawak. A company called Zeddy, part of the Xinyang Group, logged forests on the Iban community's ancestral land without permission. Instead of protecting the community, authorities threatened to arrest the protesters. Human Rights Watch urged Malaysia to strengthen its laws and called on countries buying Sarawak timber to ensure their wood doesn't come from human rights abuses. The organization also highlighted the kidnapping of Myanmar refugee activist Tuzar Mong and her family in Kuala Lumpur. She had escaped violence in Myanmar, yet was still targeted. Human Rights Watch called on Malaysia to investigate the case and ensure refugees are protected from cross-border threats. This case shows that safety and refuge are not always guaranteed.
Conflicts between a country's federal constitution and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or UDHR, often arise when national laws don't fully reflect international human rights standards. To resolve these conflicts, nations usually rely on 3 main methods: interpretation, legislation, and, in some cases, constitutional reform. The first and most common approach is called interpretive harmony. Judges interpret the federal constitution in a way that aligns with international human rights norms. Even though the UDHR isn't a binding treaty, its principles often guide courts when interpreting constitutional rights more broadly and progressively. For instance, a court might expand the meaning of the right to life to include the right to a clean and healthy environment, something that reflects the spirit of the UDHR. When interpretation isn't enough, the next step is legislative or executive action. Parliament can pass new laws or amend old ones to better align domestic protections with UDHR principles. Another step is treaty ratification. By ratifying international human rights conventions based on the UDHR, a country formally commits to those standards. However, in dualist countries like Malaysia, ratified treaties only take legal effect once Parliament passes specific laws to incorporate them domestically. The final and most challenging approach is a constitutional amendment. This involves directly changing the federal constitution to match international human rights standards. For example, if the constitution prohibits discrimination only on the basis of race, it might be amended to include gender, disability, or sexual orientation, reflecting the UDHR's inclusive principles. In Malaysia, the federal constitution remains the supreme law of the land. The UDHR, while not legally binding, serves as a persuasive and moral guide. Malaysian courts and the Human Rights Commission, or Suhakam, often refer to UDHR principles, but only when they don't conflict with the constitution itself. Ultimately, the goal is to harmonize Malaysia's foundational laws with evolving international human rights standards, bridging the gap between national sovereignty and universal human dignity.
Malaysia's human rights condition reflects a nation trying to balance constitutional rights, cultural diversity, and religious values. While the federal constitution promises basic freedoms, the reality is more complicated. Although the constitution is legally supreme, these guarantees often face limits, especially when they intersect with security laws, religious considerations, or executive practices. This creates gaps between rights on paper and rights in everyday life. One major development was the establishment of SUHAKAM, Malaysia's Human Rights Commission. Its creation signaled that the government recognized the need for independent monitoring of human rights issues. However, SUHAKAM's authority is limited. It can investigate, raise awareness, and recommend reforms, but it cannot enforce them without government approval. Despite this, SUHAKAM has made meaningful contributions through research, education, and advocacy. Civil society organizations have also played a vital role. Groups like ProHam, Hakam, Suka Society, and Mikasi work on issues ranging from women's rights and indigenous rights to refugee protection and LGBTQ+ advocacy. Their persistence keeps human rights at the center of public discussion. International organizations such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch provide additional oversight. Their reports highlight concerns from restrictions on speech and assembly to discrimination against minorities and refugees, which help guide domestic reforms. At the heart of the challenge is reconciling Malaysia's constitutional provisions with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This requires ongoing dialogue between government institutions, religious authorities, your NGOs, legal experts, and the public. Ultimately, progress depends on political will, public demand, and strong institutions working together to uphold dignity, justice, and fundamental freedoms for all Malaysians.